Hey guys, welcome to the podcast Little Girls Aren't Taught This. I'm your host, self-love coach, and that feminist friend that you all need, Lydia McCartney. So this week's episode is all around emotions and how to master your emotions. And it's a topic that I think is really important, and that I think it's one that we all should understand, and we all should try to. So the things I discuss in this podcast, all of these tips and tools, I think we should all try our best to utilize them, because once you gain that perspective on your emotions and you learn to work with them, not against them, is honestly when things begin to shift massively, not only in terms of like self-love and self-understanding, but also in terms of like perspective of things that we go through or we face at times and the struggles that we have. And honestly, just mastering your emotions is life-changing, because this is the type of stuff that we're not taught to do. We're not taught how to tune in and tap into our emotions. We're not taught that the full range of emotions that we experience are all okay. Like, emotions are given labels, and it just so happens that certain emotions are being made good, certain emotions are being made bad and made fearful, and because of that we have so much fear and scarcity around those heavy emotions that we experience. So I'm going to discuss how to work with emotions in this podcast episode, but before I do that, I'm just going to pull a little oracle card like I did last week. So let's have a little feel into it, and let's see what feels like it's coming up in. Right, so enlightened heart and mind, perfection versus imperfection. So that could be quite relevant to some of you, and I will read out what it means. Making important decisions, but be comforted by the fact that it is not possible to know everything. When you don't have all the facts, your heart will always give you the right answer. Understand the limits of your mind. You can't know everything. Progress occurs only when you move forward despite uncertainty. So that was this episode's little oracle card, and take from that what you will. Maybe that will resonate with some of you, maybe that will not resonate with some of you. It's all divine time, and that you hear things when it is needed to be heard. So this podcast, emotions, I often think of emotions as little cues, or I often call them like my minions, and I just like the idea of having this like computer base in my head, and like all my little minions are sitting there trying to figure everything out and keep me on tune and keep me on track throughout the day. And then when something happens, it's just like one of the minions spills his coffee, goes into complete overdrive. And I don't know what it is for me, but just that visual image can at times really lighten the loads of things I'm experiencing. So if I'm in quite like a high stress situation, or I'm feeling really down, to picture that adds like that childlike element. So that is also something you guys could do if you want to take the heaviness off certain things that you're feeling, and just go to like a childlike space to help you process and help you get through things, and just help you pull you out, I guess, of sometimes when we're in our feels and in our emotions, it is very like adult life and serious, and just having that like visual element for me is just always something that makes me chuckle. So yeah, our emotions, it's something that we're not taught about, like I said in the introduction, and it's something that is so important as we grow up to understand and just essentially learn about. And I think we're not taught about our emotions when we grow up, and I think that is where it all begins to go wrong, because we have so many experiences in our lives. And I think if we were just taught about how to manage our emotions and how to tune into them and not have this fear around that. And I think part of, I always say, our culture, our British culture, is having that stiff upper lip and making out like everything is okay, because expressing emotions is often seen as a sign of vulnerability. It's a sign of weakness. And it is really, I guess, daunting for a lot of people to go to that space and truly understand how they're feeling. I also think because we're a culture of being quite disconnected to ourselves, and even so much more now with social media, that level of disconnect is not only in our external world, but it also shines like a beacon into our internal world. So we are at times very disconnected from ourselves. So it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of consciousness to begin to connect those dots and go into your internal world and truly understand what it is that you're feeling and sit with that. It takes a lot of courage to sit with your emotions, especially if you're experiencing something that is quite difficult or overwhelming, or something that just seems at the time impossible to get out of. But that is the key with it, isn't it? It's like when we don't understand our emotions, it's like a monster that we give air to and it gets bigger. And then before we know it, the monster is so much bigger than us. And it is a battle to get away from it. So I always say tapping in and tuning into your emotions is catching the monster early. And it really is a point of becoming aware of your thoughts and then noticing how the emotion inside of you is triggering the thought process. And then from the thought process, that is then determining your behaviours. And often we feel like at that moment when our thoughts are spiralling and our emotions seem completely overwhelming, we feel like we've lost control. And the reality is we always have control if we just sit with it. So I always say to my clients, you are always the student and the teacher. You are the teacher of your own inner world and you are the student because you are here to learn from yourself. And by doing that is just completely sitting with yourself and going inwardly. So emotions are one of the biggest cues for what is going on and what we need and what direction we should be going in. And often, a lot of the time as well, our emotions will tell us if we are in alignment with our values, if we are living a life that really aligns with everything that we want and the people that we want in it, and we are getting the things that we feel we deserve. And your emotions will be able to are a guidance system for that. So I think because we don't really think too much about emotions, do we actually ever sit and think what they are? Do we give them a name? Do we give them a label? Do we even think about them? I honestly don't think that we do. And that's the reason why we miss that guidance that's there. That's the reason why sometimes when we feel so lost and consumed in our reality or what we perceive as our reality, because our perception, that's the lens that we're looking through. It's because we don't know what way we should be going, we should be heading towards. And often when you just sit with yourself and you do truly begin to tap into your emotions is when you fully begin to understand that. So for this, within this podcast, I'm going to talk about 4 ways we deal with emotions. And then I'm going to reference the Tony Robbins book that I always talk about on my Instagram, Awaken the Giant. And I am going to take you through the emotional steps to mastering your emotions. So it's really profound, that part in the book, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I highly recommend that people read it because it is an absolutely incredible book. So ways that we deal with emotions, there's 4 ways. The first one is we avoid them. And I don't know about you guys, but for a long time, this was my go-to. This was my default to avoid and then maybe deny. And I think the reason being is it's just easier to do that, isn't it? It's easier to put that brave face on, make out like everything is okay, everything feels okay, and go about our day. And I think one of the things we fail to understand is that our emotions are so powerful and they store within our body. Like I said before, they are cues for our internal world, and they are the cues of the body. The body is the storehouse of things that we are feeling. So if we avoid them and we suppress them, it's like we have this notion that we believe that they will just go away. But the reality is they don't go away. So even if you avoid them, or even if you don't think that you need to deal with it because things aren't as bad as what, you don't want to believe that things are quite as bad or quite as overwhelming. To avoid them just means to put them in a little box. But the thing is, our emotions have so much power. They will come up when the time is right. They will never go away. They will always come back up and manifest in one way or another and let you know that they need dealing with. So many of us go to that as a default, that avoidance, that, oh God, it'll just get better if I just don't think about it. But that unfortunately is not the reality, because, your body keeps the score and your body knows the things that you are feeling, and it does not just get rid of it that easily. The second way that we deal with emotions is we deny them. So this in a way works hand in hand with avoidance. However, I think denial is probably one of the first things that we do. So we'll deny for so long, and then maybe we might come to a level of acceptance, or we may have that moment with ourselves where it hits us how much we are struggling, or how we are truly actually feeling. And then we go into the avoidance. It's like we know, but we don't want to face it. So when we deny, it's like not even that baseline level of acceptance that we are struggling. It's just total turning our back away from our truth. And when you do that, it's so difficult to honor how you're feeling. So it goes hand in hand with self-love, and a part of self-love is honoring your emotions. I always talk about this, and I'm very big on this when I'm struggling, is I will honor how I'm showing up. So to avoid and deny is essentially not choosing yourself. Like, you are saying that you're not worthy enough of honoring how you're feeling. And part of that is because sometimes it's too difficult, it's too vulnerable, it's too raw, it's too hard to go to that space, which is absolutely fine. We all go there when we feel like we're ready. But if you do this time after time and layer after layer of all these avoided emotions or all of this self-denial, you're going to go into sabotage mode. You're going to go, without realizing it, begin to sabotage yourself, because those emotions and those beliefs that are forming from those emotions are festering under the surface. So a part of self-love is honoring how you're feeling, even on the really difficult days. The third way that we deal with emotions is we can learn and use the emotion that we felt to then shift our perspective or use it as a tool for growth. So if you're experiencing something like a really difficult emotion, if you tap into that and you sit with that and you understand that, you can often learn so much. And I always say to clients, and I say it on podcasts when people ask me about this type of stuff, we always rush to get past the difficulties. We always rush to get past the difficult moments. And for me, it's sitting and basking in that uncomfortability and that difficult time where you find the most magic is created. So if you're turning your back on the darkness, you can never appreciate the light. And something you will always hear me say is you have to learn to dance in the dark to appreciate the light. Dancing in the dark is sitting with those difficult emotions. It's sitting with the ugliness. It's sitting with the guilt and the shame, partly around other people, but sometimes as a reflection of ourselves. And we've done something where we've come away from our values that we have, and we've come away from things that are important to us. So when you sit with that, you can really use that as a tool of growth to understand yourself, really use that as a tool for self-love going forward, and really use that as a tool to see what you need. Because if you're not learning from it, from an emotion that's showing up, essentially you're not giving yourself what you need. So you're always putting yourself bottom of the list. The fourth way that we deal with emotions is to indulge. So we've probably all been guilty of this at some point, just sitting with those emotions and really feeling, going into victim modes, really feeling that we deserve to be where we are, and it's okay for us to be in that negative space of just emotional sympathy for ourselves. And sometimes it's okay to do that. Sometimes it's okay if you're feeling a little bit shitty to be like, just don't feel the best today, and I'm gonna have a day of self-care, and I'm gonna turn my phone off, and I don't have the energy to deal with anybody else. Sometimes that's absolutely fine. However, when the point crosses is when you, like I said before, go into that victim mood. And when you are given evidence to prove a belief that you have, isn't exactly the truth and you turn your head away from it. You don't want to see that. So you have a strong rooted belief. So it could be a belief that you deserve to be anxious because of things that you've experienced. So you sit in that anxiousness and essentially it becomes a part of your identity. So what we can do as well is when we've experienced emotions and experiences that really, really solidify that emotion, like anxiety or depression or just general negativity, what we can tend to do is make that part of our identity, and it then becomes vulnerable to step away from that, because sometimes it makes it easier to navigate through life if you believe that everything's negative, or sometimes it makes it easier to say that all men are not good because you have been hurt in the past. And it's better for you to stay in that space of negativity. And it's better for you to have that belief, because to edge out of that feels too vulnerable and you don't want to put yourself out there. So there's all of these like complicated elements to emotions, and especially when it comes to indulgence, because I think it creates a comfort zone. It creates a like a safe space that we can just stay in, and even if we're challenged, it's okay for us to feel like we can stay there. So they're the 4 ways that we deal with emotions, and we probably switch between them all at some point. And I think the most self-loving one out of all of those is obviously to use that emotion as a teaching point and something to understand about ourselves. And our emotions, like I said before at the beginning of this podcast, are a call to action, and they are a guidance to show you what you need. And this links into what Tony Robbins talks about with his emotional mastery. So I'll just go through these 6 steps. So this is the book Awaken the Giant Within, and I will put the link to purchase in the show notes. But essentially it is one of the most amazing books I've ever read. And in his chapter about emotions, these are the 6 steps that he says can begin to break patterns and begin to allow you to benefit from an emotion that you're feeling. So step 1, identify what you're really feeling. So what is it that you're feeling? Because is it depression, or is it uneasiness? Is it anxiety, or is it another emotion that may feel similar on the spectrum but is not the same? Is it anger, or is the underlying emotion underneath that anger hurt? Has somebody really hurt you and betrayed you, but it's coming out on the surface as anger? So it's about really getting clear on what is it that you're feeling, and you using your language to empower you in what you are feeling and allow you to understand it. So our language has so much power because it can shift the perspective of things. Even a slight change in language can completely change how something lands, how something is processed, how you view something, your perspective on something. So look at the language that you're using and look at the intensity of the language that you're using. So often, we will say things like, oh, I feel so depressed. That word is so commonly used. And the reality is, are you feeling depressed, or are you feeling really low? And I think the impact of that makes a huge difference when you begin to look at how that word will land, and also when you begin to look at how that language choice will shape your behaviors and shape how people interact with you. Step 2, acknowledge and appreciate your emotions, knowing they support you. So be thankful that there's a part of you that can feel these emotions. Be thankful that there's a part of you that is able to give you a signal and give you an indication when something's not feeling quite right. So often, and this links back to what I said before, we just put our head in the sand and we just power through when we feel negative emotions. And we are so afraid of being in that space. So what I always say is, acknowledge those difficulties and actually appreciate the fact that you're in that space. And I know that sounds quite bizarre to begin to get your head around, like, Lydia, why would I feel happy that I'm in a negative space? But it's when you're actually in that space, if you're really consumed by something, you may not feel appreciative of it. But it's about when you begin to, when the sun begins to break through the clouds again and you begin to look up and see that, oh yeah, the storm is about to pass, you can appreciate what you've just gone through and you can look at it with a different lens and a different view. And it's not just about being appreciative of the good emotions, because to fully appreciate feeling good, in a way you have to appreciate the moments where it doesn't feel as easy and it doesn't feel as gentle and as nice. So acknowledge them, even if you just say to yourself, okay, today, and this links back to honoring yourself, okay, today I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling really uneasy, I'm feeling anxious, but what is showing up for me today? And then this links to step 3. Get curious about the message this emotion is offering you. So remember I said before, our emotions are cues to what's going on. So getting curious helps master your emotions, solve the challenge, and prevent the same problem occurring in the future. So Tony Robbins says there's 4 questions to ask yourself, and it's, what do I really want to feel? What would I have to believe in order to feel the way I've been feeling? What am I willing to do to create a solution and handle this right now? And what can I learn from this? And it's when you begin to get curious is when you truly begin to understand yourself and the things around you. So, you may get triggered with an emotion if something happens. So let's say your partner speaks to you in a way that you don't like and it gets you really angry. Get curious about what that anger is showing you. Get curious about that message that's inside that's showing up for you. Is it actually that your partner has shown you something that doesn't align with your values in terms of being in a relationship? Is it that you felt a certain level of disrespect? Is it that it's triggered something from an old relationship and you don't feel heard or seen? So what is it about that anger that would be showing up? And I think it's really important, because sometimes when we experience an emotion, I think especially like an overwhelming, intense emotion, we can just be very reactive. And I know in the past I've been so reactive at times, and I've worked so hard to try and pull away from that. And it's not easy, because one of my given personality traits is that I am quite hot-headed. I am a Scorpio woman. And I don't know if it's just like being a Scouse woman as well, but yeah, I'm very like vocal. But I just understood that was not good for me. Like, that was not serving anybody. That was not serving me whatsoever. So now it's about if I feel that level of anger bubbling again, it's about taking myself away and becoming curious about what is it that it's trying to show me, and what is the deeper thing that's showing up for me. Is it like I've gone against my value? What is it? And I think when we try and process things that we've done, like guilt or shame, they can be really difficult emotions to deal with. And they are definitely the ones that we avoid or we deny, because there's something so jarring, I want to say, about being in that space and you're just like, oh my God, I've just let myself down so much and I feel ashamed and I've completely gone against my values, who I am as a person. But it's in that moment, instead of turning our back away from it, sitting with it and being like, okay, what is this showing me about myself? And then it's obviously the processes of forgiveness and working towards those steps with forgiveness. Get confident. So the quickest, simplest, most powerful way to begin to handle your emotion is realize that you've done it before. So none of these emotions that you experience in your life are brand new. Like we've dealt with these. We've dealt with anger when we were children. We just probably can't remember it. We've dealt with sadness. We've dealt with joy. We've dealt with all of the full range of emotions. And as we've developed and grown up, we've dealt with these emotions 10 times over. And the thing is, you've dealt with it then, you can deal with it now. And it's about just having that realization and that understanding, because it helps you get perspective. You know, when that wave feels like it's coming towards you, that tidal wave, it helps you really get perspective and ground yourself and see that the wave will pass over you. It doesn't have to come full force and knock you off your feet. If you are grounded in that sand, if you are grounded there as the waves coming towards you, and you know that you've done this before and you can do it again, is when it will wash over you, but it won't completely consume you. So I think that's really important as well. So shift your perspective, shift your focus. Step 5, get certain you can handle this not only today but in the future too. So I think that's another really important thing, is when we're in a bad space or dealing with a difficult emotion, we sometimes come out of it and think, oh, thank God that's over. And then we go back to being in our happy bubble. And the thing is, we're humans, because we're so afraid of death and we're so afraid of, and no, I think it is death. And I think it's because because we like to romanticize life, that we don't want to think about the bad times coming again. But the reality is, they're going to come in the future. Life is up and down, and you can handle anything that is coming your way. Step 6, is get excited and take action. So be excited about the things that you're learning with your emotions, and, you know, be excited about these cues, these signals, these lessons that are coming up for you, these areas of growth that are coming up, and take action. Like, one of the reasons why we become so consumed again with our emotions is because we don't take action in the moment, because we bury our head in the sand. And part of that means, like I said earlier in the podcast, and I always say to my clients, is you miss the moments of magic that the universe is placing in your lap when you bury your head. And, you know, when you feel into things is when you have to make a conscious choice to take action. And taking action could simply be, right, I'm going to sit with this and ride it out. I'm not going to deny, I'm not going to avoid it, I'm going to sit with it. Part of it could be, like, if it's a relationship that is constantly pulling you down, it could be, okay, I need to take action and I need to work towards getting myself out of this relationship or job or whatever it is. Or if you feel really disconnected and disheartened about your body, instead of staying in that space and indulging in it and just being like, oh yeah, well, this is how it's meant to be, and I'm not gonna ever love my body, and there's no point trying. All of these common things that we say as women, it's really about, okay, feel into that, because the intensity of feeling into your emotions and getting really honest with yourself is uncomfortable, but it's that uncomfortability that really nurtures growth. And when you feel into that and you stop avoiding or denying it, is honestly when you are forced to make a decision about what you want to do. So that is this week's podcast episode on emotions, and I hope you did enjoy it. And it's something that I honestly feel is so important, and especially after life lessons last year, 10 million thousand of them, what felt like 10 million lifetimes that I lived last year. One of the things I massively took away from it is that sitting with emotions and processing them is one of the most self-loving things that we can do. And it is honestly one of the most powerful things that we can do. And to do that does not mean that you are vulnerable. It does not mean that you are weak. It actually means that you have strength in immeasurable measures, because you are being vulnerable, and that takes courage to be vulnerable, especially to go there with yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast episode, and if you are wanting to reach out in terms of any programs or one-on-one coaching, any empowerment coaching, please feel free to drop me a DM on Instagram, Self-Love Lydia, or head to my website, lydiamccartney.com. So I hope you've all enjoyed it. I shall see you next week for the next episode.